6 mythical creatures that really existed. Part 7. Throughout human history, the most persistent legends are never the ones invented around a fire for entertainment. The most persistent legends are the ones that started with something real, something witnessed, something survived, something too large or too strange or too terrifying to be explained any other way. Tonight, we have 6 more creatures from 6 different corners of the world. 6 beings that science dismissed as myth. 6 legends that turned out to have more truth behind them than anyone expected. This is part 7, and we are nowhere near finished. Creature number 1, the Rock. In the medieval Islamic world, the Rock was not a legend told to children. It was a geographical fact, noted by scholars and traders and explorers with the same matter-of-fact certainty they applied to trade routes and ocean currents. The great traveler Ibn Battuta mentioned it. Marco Polo described it in detail, reporting that sailors in the Indian Ocean gave it specific coordinates, the island of Madagascar, where it nested, and where its eggs were said to be large enough for a man to stand inside. The Rock's description was consistent across Arabic, Persian, and Chinese sources, separated by centuries and thousands of miles. A bird of unimaginable size, capable of carrying an elephant in its talons, that ruled the skies above the southern Indian Ocean. Here is where the legend and the fossil record collide in a way that is genuinely difficult to dismiss. The elephant bird, Epiornis maximus, was real. It lived on Madagascar. It stood 10 feet tall, weighed over half a ton, and laid eggs that were the largest of any animal known to science, each one holding the equivalent of 150 chicken eggs. It went extinct sometime between 1000 and 1200 AD, precisely the period when Arab traders were most active in the Indian Ocean and most likely to encounter it, or to encounter the communities that lived alongside it, or to find its enormous eggs washed up on beaches. A 10-foot bird producing eggs large enough to be mistaken for small buildings, living on exactly the island the Rock was said to inhabit, going extinct at exactly the moment the Rock legends were at their most detailed and specific. But the elephant bird couldn't fly. The Rock flew. So where did the wings come from? Researchers believe the flying component may have entered the legend through a different route. The Haast's eagle of New Zealand, which could reach wingspans of 10 feet and was real enough to hunt animals far larger than itself, and which was known to cultures across the Polynesian world that shared trading connections with the Arab sailors who carried the Rock legend west. 2 real birds from 2 different islands, merged by the alchemy of trade routes and oral tradition into one impossible
I see the palm
creature.
trees.
The Rock was never one animal. It was the memory of 2, both of them real, both of them extraordinary, and both of them gone before science arrived to confirm they had ever existed. Creature number 2, the Selkie. Along the rocky coastlines of Scotland, Ireland, and the Faroe Islands, the people who made their living from the sea told stories of creatures that lived between 2 worlds. The Selkie. In the water, a seal. Sleek, intelligent, watching the shore with eyes that held something unsettlingly close to human recognition. On land, a person, shedding the seal skin like a garment, walking among humans, capable of love and grief and the particular longing of something that belongs nowhere completely. We never saw the boat again, only the fog. The Selkie legend is one of the most emotionally precise in the Celtic tradition. A being caught between 2 natures, never fully at home in either world, always drawn back to the one it left. The seal itself is responsible for more of this legend than people generally appreciate. Gray seals and harbor seals, the species most common along the coasts where Selkie stories originate, are extraordinarily expressive animals. Their eyes are large and dark and forward-facing in a way unusual for marine mammals, producing a gaze that humans consistently describe as almost human. They are highly curious and will approach humans in the water and on shore with an apparent interest that feels to anyone who has experienced it remarkably intentional. They vocalize in ways that, heard at a distance through sea fog, have been documented to resemble human voices, particularly the cries of women or children. Coastal communities that lived in close proximity to large seal colonies for generations would have accumulated hundreds of specific detailed observations of seal behavior that the Selkie legend neatly organizes and explains. Here's the layer that researchers find most compelling. Certain genetic conditions, including a rare disorder called mermaid syndrome, and more commonly, the genetic traits associated with populations that have lived beside the sea for thousands of years, produce physical characteristics that communities historically associated with Selkie ancestry: unusually webbed fingers, darker skin and eyes, and exceptional comfort in cold water. In the Northern Isles of Scotland, some families maintained Selkie ancestry traditions that modern genetic analysis has connected to specific population migrations along the Atlantic coast. The Selkie wasn't just a story about seals, it was a story about people, about difference, about belonging, about the way communities explained the stranger who came from the sea and never quite became one of them. Creature number 3, the Taniwha. In the oral traditions of the Maori people of New Zealand, traditions that have been demonstrated to accurately preserve factual information going back thousands of years, the Taniwha occupies a position unlike any creature in European mythology. It is not simply a monster, it is a guardian, a chief, a force of nature with specific territory, specific personality, and specific relationships with specific communities. Different iwi, tribal groups, have their own Taniwha, known by name, associated with particular rivers, lakes, or coastal stretches, and capable of both protection and destruction depending on how they are treated.
They are warnings,
the Taniwha is described in varying
reminding
forms,
us that the
sometimes as a great shark, sometimes as a lizard of enormous size, sometimes as a log that moves against the current, sometimes as something that has no precise physical form at all, but whose presence is felt in the movement of water. The scientific context for the Taniwha is richer than most people realize.
Until this precise
New
moment
Zealand
here,
was, until the arrival of humans approximately 700 years ago, one of the most isolated large land masses on Earth. Its fauna evolved in complete separation from mammalian predators, producing birds that grew to enormous size and lost the ability to fly, and reptiles that are the last survivors of lineages that ruled the planet before the dinosaurs. The tuatara, a real animal still living in New Zealand, is the sole surviving member of an order of reptiles that was globally dominant 200 million years ago. It is, in the most literal sense, a living fossil. And the tuatara's ancestors included species of considerable size, a large, ancient reptile in the rivers and lakes of a landscape that had never seen anything quite like it, encountered by a people arriving from tropical Polynesia who had no prior framework for such a creature, would generate exactly the kind of specific, detailed, culturally embedded legend that the Taniwha represents. In 2002, the Taniwha entered New Zealand's legal record when a proposed highway extension was rerouted after Maori consultation identified the proposed path as passing through Taniwha territory.
The Crown
The government took the objection seriously. Engineers redesigned the route.
But the
decision was controversial
for our people.
But it reflected something important. The Maori relationship with the Taniwha was not primitive superstition to be dismissed. It was a sophisticated system of ecological knowledge, accumulated over centuries of careful observation that identified certain places as significant in ways that the community's tradition had preserved with more accuracy than anyone outside that tradition had been willing to credit. Creature number 4, the Qilin. In Chinese mythology, the Qilin stands apart from every other legendary creature in one remarkable way. It is gentle. In a tradition filled with dragons, demons, and monsters of terrifying power, the Qilin is an omen of good, a being of such perfect virtue that it treads so softly it leaves no mark on the grass beneath its feet, and is careful never to harm a living insect. It appears only in times of peace, in the reign of wise rulers, as a sign that the world is in harmony. Its appearance combines features of multiple real animals, the scales of a fish or dragon, the hooves of a deer, the tail of an ox, and a single horn.
Yet the core
It
image of the
is, in its
Qilin
essence,
remains
a
consistent,
creature so precisely
symbol of
good that it could only exist in legend. Except that in 1414, a Chinese fleet returned from East Africa carrying a living Qilin, or so the crew believed. The animal was presented to the Yongle Emperor in Beijing, who received it with appropriate solemnity as a divine omen of his reign's virtue. The creature was a giraffe. Sent as a diplomatic gift by the Sultan of Malindi in present-day Kenya, the giraffe had reached China via the extraordinary voyages of the Admiral Zheng He, whose fleet had traveled as far as the East African coast decades before European explorers reached the same waters. The Chinese court had never seen a giraffe. Its patterned coat resembled scales. It had horn-like ossicones. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace that seemed to match the Qilin's legendary gentleness exactly. What's fascinating about the Qilin
between the
giraffe
mythical
connection
depiction and the
is not
actual
just that a
giraffe
real
are too
animal was
striking to
mistaken
ignore.
for a mythical
Notice
one.
the neck
That
and the
happens
ossicones.
throughout history. What's fascinating is the direction of the mistake. The Qilin legend existed before the giraffe arrived in China. Something produced that legend. Some earlier observation. Some fragment of trade route information about a tall, patterned, horn-bearing animal in a distant land
and the
that
pattern,
predated
like
the 1414
deep umber
presentation by
spots covering
centuries.
its massive form.
The
This
giraffe
symbol isn't
confirmed
just
a legend
decorative.
that had been
It
waiting
marks
for
a
it,
convergence point,
which means
linking
that
the
somewhere in the
mythology
history of
directly to the
Chinese
flow of
contact
commerce
with the
in the
wider
14th
world,
century.
someone had seen a giraffe or heard a precise enough description of one to build a mythology around an animal they had never met. The Qilin was real before the giraffe arrived. The giraffe simply proved it. Creature number 5, the New. In the literature and art of medieval Japan, there appears a creature of deeply unsettling composition, the Nue. It has the head of a monkey, the body of a tanuki, the Japanese raccoon dog, the legs of a tiger, and a tail that ends in the head of a snake. It flies through the night sky like a bird, producing a cry so haunting and so wrong that anyone who hears it falls into a mysterious illness, a wasting sickness with no identifiable cause, a creeping dread that settles into the bones and doesn't leave. The Nue appears in the Heike Monogatari, the tale of the Heike, one of the foundational texts of Japanese literature composed in the 12th century, where the warrior Minamoto no Yorimasa shoots it from the night sky above the imperial palace. The emperor had been falling ill for weeks, waking in terror every night without knowing why, and the Nue's cry above the palace was identified as the cause. The illness the Nue produces is, in modern medical terms, recognizable. A progressive, unexplained wasting disease accompanied by night terrors, dread, and a sense of malevolent presence. That is a description of severe chronic psychological distress producing physiological symptoms, something that medieval Japanese physicians had no framework to understand but clearly observed with precision. The Nue gave a name and a cause to a category of suffering that defied the available medical vocabulary. And in doing so, it documented something real,
directly correlate
that certain
with severe
kinds of
inflammation
fear sustained
and a dramatic
long enough
suppression of the
make
body's
the body
immune
sick
functions.
in ways that leave no visible wound. But there's a zoological dimension too. The Nue's composite description: primate head, mammalian body, feline legs, serpentine tail, matches no single known animal. However, Japan's forests contain species that, encountered in darkness, produce exactly the kind of wrong, unsettling sounds the legend describes. The Japanese giant flying squirrel produces calls that experienced naturalists describe as genuinely disturbing. The Japanese macaque, the snow monkey, makes sounds at night that carry through mountain forests in ways that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere. And certain owl species in Japan produce cries that traditional communities specifically associated with illness and death. The Nue was assembled from the night sounds of a real forest, given a body to match the dread it produced, and placed in the sky above the most powerful man in Japan to explain what was already clearly happening to him. Creature number 6, the Wahila. In the Nahanni Valley of Canada's Northwest Territories, one of the most remote and least accessible places in North America, There is a legend shared by the indigenous Dene people and confirmed in its essentials by the reports of European trappers and prospectors who entered the valley in the 19th and early 20th centuries.
The scale is
Wahila,
unprecedented. Not only is this specimen larger than any known wolf,
larger than
but the
any
cranial
wolf
structure
that has
suggests
ever
a much
been
broader,
confirmed by
heavier animal.
science, the size of a bear, according to some accounts, with a broader head, a heavier build, and white fur. It hunts alone, not in packs. It leaves tracks unlike any known canid, and it is associated in the Nahanni Valley's extraordinarily dark history with the decapitated bodies that gave the valley its English name, the Headless Valley. Multiple prospectors were found there in the early 1900s, dead, their heads missing. No predator was ever officially identified. The Nahanni Valley is genuinely one of the strangest places in North America. It contains hot springs, subtropical microclimates, canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon, and a documented history of disappearances that stretches from the early 20th century to the present. Its geography, deep, narrow canyons with limited access
As you
points,
can see illustrated
makes
on this
systematic
map,
survey
the migration
nearly
patterns
impossible.
shift here,
The
near
Dean
the
people
eastern
who have
fork.
lived beside it for
This is why-
centuries treat it with a specific, practical caution that is not superstition but accumulated knowledge. This place has things in it that can kill you, and some of
As you
them
can
we
see,
don't fully
the dire wolf
understand.
skull is dramatically
Here's where
broader and features a much
paleontology enters.
heavier build
Dire
compared to its modern
wolves,
counterpart.
Enocean dirus, were real. They were larger and more heavily built than gray wolves, with broader skulls and more powerful jaws, and they lived
These
across North
unusually long
America
legs,
until
especially
approximately
the tibiae and
9,500 years
fibulae,
ago.
indicate a
More
cursorial
recently,
adaptation.
Arctodus simus, the short-faced bear, was a real North American predator of extraordinary size, faster than a modern grizzly, with a build that would, to an observer used to bears and wolves, look like neither. Both species overlapped with early human populations in North America. Both could have persisted in isolated, food-rich, geographically protected environments like the Nahanni Valley considerably longer than the official extinction dates suggest. The fossil record in the Canadian subarctic is incomplete in ways that make precise dating difficult. Does the Wahila really exist today? Probably not. But the Nahanni Valley has kept its secrets for a very long time, and it has not finished keeping them. 6 more creatures. 6 more legends with roots deeper than fiction. The world is older than our ability to map it, and far stranger than our textbooks suggest. Every time science closes a door on the impossible, something pushes it back open. A fossil in the wrong layer, a photograph from the wrong forest, a sound from the wrong depth of ocean. The next video is already waiting. And trust us, we are just getting started.